I find myself reading all of his stories about Twitter and big tech and all that stuff. And you can follow him on Twitter at BlueBoxDave. Today, he tweeted out that he will be wearing 14 masks because he's a good person. David, you are a good person. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
David, my first question is about your article, Mitch McConnell Needs to Go. I think a lot of people feel this same way. Do you think there's any chance that someone would challenge him for the leadership position? And if so, who do you think would do it?
I think it's unlikely in the short term, at least over the next 2 years, just because, you'd be challenging to be minority leader, not the majority leader. But, should the Republicans have a good midterm and take back control of the Senate, I do think that it's a possibility. There are clearly some people who are challenging his authority. Josh Hawley, to some extent, Ted Cruz also seems like he would like to be involved in leadership. And I think the challenge for McConnell is that he really made it clear that he was trying to excise Trump from the Republican Party by playing footsie with this whole impeachment stuff. He thought that there would be a tidal wave of defections. That hasn't happened. So it's left him in a pretty vulnerable position.
And I think what your article does a good job of touching on, which I've seen a lot of people say, is that Mitch McConnell seems to want to have the constituency of Trump or the popularity of Trump without Trump himself. And that's not happening. You make a point of mentioning nobody's lining up to watch Mitch McConnell speak or no one's wearing Mitch McConnell merch. So do you think he has an inflated sense of self, or do you think he just thought he could, make this happen?
I think he expected, as many people did, I happen not to, but a lot of people expected that Trump's popularity was going to take a huge hit after the events on the Capitol on January 6th. It turns out that it hasn't. Ultimately, I believe what Mitch McConnell wants is to turn back the clock to 2004, 2008, to the past 30 years before Trump, when the GOP establishment was basically able to say to its voters, we don't really care about your values or beliefs or issues, but we're better than the Democrats, so you have to go with us and you have no choice. Trump proved that they did have a choice, and they could get action on issues like trade and immigration and stopping foreign wars and really all of Trump's policy side, which at the end of the day, I believe turned out to be even more important than his sort of cult of personality.
Yeah. My other question for you, David Marcus, this is just something I heard today. I don't even know if it's possible, but I heard this idea being floated around that Mitch McConnell might call for a secret vote. And by doing that, he would kind of hide everyone's identity so that, there wouldn't be such backlash against them and they might not get primaried if they decided to vote his way. Have you heard anything about that?
I haven't, but everything that I've heard, both from people that I know who are close to the Hill and colleagues of mine, is that it's extremely unlikely that the votes are there to convict Trump, because everyone realizes, it would just absolutely set the party on fire.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's really in anybody's interest.
Now, David, I'm talking to David Marcus from the Federalist. I want to switch gears here because I agreed with you on a story you wrote about Lauren Wolf. So our audience knows Lauren Wolf got in trouble. She got fired from the New York Times because she said that Joe Biden arriving in Washington, D.C. gave her chills. The tweet kind of went viral. She then deleted her Twitter, and then she got fired. And a lot of people said that shouldn't have happened for a multitude of reasons. You have a very different reason why you think the New York Times should have kept her on staff. Can you explain that to people?
Yeah, first of all, I'm against this sort of counterculture stuff, right? So I don't think that a dumb tweet or a tweet that shows bias or whatever should lead to people getting fired. But even more importantly, whoever is going to replace Lauren Wolf at the New York Times, and that's a place that I've written for, it's a place that I know pretty well, is going to hold the same political bias, just more quietly. So the problem ultimately that the New York Times has is not that this person showed their bias. It's that entire building is nothing but progressive bias. We saw that with the Tom Cotton op-ed calling for the National Guard to come in this summer, where you had a complete revolt in the newsroom. James Bennett, who was the op-ed page editor, was basically ousted because of it. Fast forward a few months, and there's 25,000 National Guard in Washington, D.C., and the New York Times thinks this is perfectly fine. So the bias there is so overwhelming that that's the problem that they need to address, not the fact that one of their editors accidentally let that cat out of the bag.
It reminds me of when Obama was talking about the defund the police movement, and he was basically saying, listen, they have to be more subtle about it. And you make that point. You say the fact of the matter is that we are better off with Wolf wearing her leanings on Twitter than we are having her hide them. This rush to cancel people or to hide their opinions, I like hearing people's opinions because then I can go, oh, that's insane, or, oh, good, I'm glad I can see how biased you are. But there's seems to be this real rush to just cancel people totally.
I think that's right. I also think that on both sides, and really all throughout journalism, some real serious questions are being asked about whether we ever really had the objective news media that we thought we did. I tend to think we didn't, right? So, I mean, you think back to when there were only three, you had the three news networks doing the nightly news, pre-cable TV, right, just newspapers and stuff.
Yeah.
Those guys hid stuff all the time, right? Like, they weren't talking about JFK's affairs because there were gatekeepers who were deciding, like, okay, this we'll talk about, this we're not going to talk about. Now we have such a fractured media landscape that really anyone with a computer and a little talent can jump on and get into the fray. And I just don't think we're ever going to go back to the point where you can look at any news source as the objective, this is what the news is. I just don't think it exists.
And on that same note, I do want to ask you if you have any opinions on the Ben Shapiro kind of uproar. He wrote the playbook for Politico, and a lot of the people at Politico were very upset. And it seems to be still keeps going. Every day I see a new update on it, like what they're going to do or, how they're all dealing with it and in their safe spaces. What do you think about that? Do you think that they've kind of proved Ben Shapiro's point?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. And, I'd expect to be fired if I did that at the Federalist. Like, that's not my job. That's my boss's job. And, yeah, it does prove his point. And the fact of the matter is, Ben Shapiro is not some crazy fringe figure. I mean, the big reason that they don't like him is, among other things, that the big one is that he's very vocal in his positions about the trans movement, right?
Right.
But we see today, we see this just this week or last week, Joe Biden signing that executive order, and you're seeing interviews with these girls in high school and women in college who are losing out on breaking records, who are not getting scholarships, who just don't have the ability to compete in a fair way. And that's ultimately what Shapiro was talking about. And they tried to cancel him for that, but the whole thing was ridiculous. It really is, especially since I think Chris Hayes had done it a day or two before, and I mean, that guy's to the left of Whoopi, so I don't get it.
Don Lemon did it the day after. He's really down the middle,
yeah.
though, David. He's a real fair reporter.
Yeah, exactly. But the fact that they would go after Shapiro this way, and we've seen it for years, right? It started on college campuses. And I think, unfortunately, what starts on college campuses ends up bleeding into our lives because people graduate from college and they end up in newsrooms at Politico. And they think that this is perfectly fine. They think that, they can say, that people who hold views that tens, if not hundreds of millions of Americans hold, can simply be shut out of the public square because they don't happen to like them or agree.
Now, my last question for you, David, because I'm sure you are watching these press conferences as closely as I am, and I'm fascinated by kind of you talked a little bit here about subtlety and, how Lauren Wolf was lacking her subtlety and she just kind of said what she actually thought. But I am surprised at the lack of nuance of these reporters. They're not even pretending. They're so obviously in the bag for Joe Biden. They have been for the last several months. Have you been watching these Jen Psaki press conferences? Are you impressed at all with any of the questions?
Yeah, they just wrapped one, so I just watched one, and it's really interesting that it really is the complete opposite, right? So whereas whereas Kelly McEnany or Trump himself would face, just a dozen really aggressive questions, calling him a liar or whatever, and maybe get like one softball from Fox or OAN or something. Now we see the exact opposite, and I got to give credit to Peter Doocy, who's Fox's new White House correspondent. He's really in the lion's den there, and he's the only one who's applying any pressure to Psaki or to Biden. And I think that's just what you're going to see. Now, I was talking to a friend of mine actually during this one, and we are starting to notice the questions from places like ABC and NBC and stuff get a little tougher, possibly because they're feeling this backlash. And when they look at themselves, they're like, oh, this is not a great look. So that pendulum may swing back a little bit, especially if they're not getting answers to questions like, how many vaccine doses do we have?
Right, and I saw that a little bit too today. I saw Peter Alexander ask Jen Psaki a question that I thought was a little bit tougher than normal, and I think you're probably right. I mean, these people have Twitters; they see how people are making fun of them, and it's just so painfully obvious. If I have to read any more stories about the dogs at the White House, I mean, I'm going to pull my hair out. So these people maybe they have a little bit of self-awareness left. We can only hope.
Yes.
David, thank you so much for joining us. I was talking to David Marcus from the Federalist. He also has a lot of stuff on the New York Post. He writes a lot about Twitter, censorship, all of that stuff. You guys should definitely read it. I read his entire piece in the other segment, and I've tweeted it out today. Mitch McConnell needs to go. It puts in words that I wouldn't have been able to write exactly how I'm feeling. And how I'm feeling is Mitch McConnell is throwing Trump under the bus. We all see it happening. I cannot believe he thinks it's going to work. I think he's a little bit delusional, but it's a great piece. Everyone should read it. And when we get back, I want to talk to you guys about that interview, about what you think of impeachment. And if you're going to wear a double mask, are you doubling up? I think a lot of people were struggling to even wear the one mask. So then when you start putting the second one on, it's a bit of a reach. Sticking to your New Year's resolution is a matter of making one right decision at a time. If you're looking to institute some healthy habits and improve your lifestyle this year, I have just what you need. You should check out Superbeats Heart Chews. I love Superbeats Heart Chews because I have pretty poor circulation, and it really helps with that. But it also helps with a variety of things. It's heart healthy. Just 2 Superbeats chews per day give you the cardiovascular support and promote the heart-healthy energy you need to chase your goals. Another thing I love about this is it combines non-GMO beets and clinically researched grapeseed extract, shown to be 2 times as effective at supporting normal blood pressure than a healthy lifestyle alone. When it comes to implementing healthy habits this year, I know it can be a lot. You get into the new year and you bite off more than you can chew. Get it? Superbeats chews. But this is an easy way where you can have these, you can feel good, you can feel like you're making a difference for your health. And it's not something where you're going to, in a week, say, oh, I can't do this anymore. Forget it, cancel the gym membership. This is something that you're going to put into your daily routine, and it's so easy. Now you can get a free 30-day supply of Superbeats Heart Chews, plus a free 30-day supply of their new delicious flavor, Super Grapes, with your first purchase by going to getsuperbeats.com/grace. That's 2 free gifts valued at over $50, only available at getsuperbeats.com/grace. That's getsuperbeats.com/grace. 844-500-4242. I'm taking all calls next segment, so call in now, and we'll be talking all about impeachment, Joe Biden, Jen Psaki, whatever you guys are thinking of. We'll be right back. This is the Grace Curley Show.
Follow Grace on Twitter at @G_Curley.